So this is the all-new OnePlus 15, and today's challenger, the Galaxy S25 Ultra. Which one is better? So what is up, guys? Nick here, helping you to master your technology, and let's talk about the OnePlus 15 versus the S25 Ultra. Now, I'm very aware that the OnePlus 15 is more probably competitive with the S25 Plus, but it does have a few things that actually make it shine over the S25 Ultra. But one of the things is right now, the S25 Ultra, while it does retail for significantly more than the OnePlus 15, currently with Black Friday sales and stuff of that sort, it is kind of close to the same price point. Still a little bit more, but they're not too far off in the price tags right now. This one is not available just yet in the US due to the government shutdown delaying things. While that has been lifted when this phone was starting to come out, it did cause a delay. So we're still waiting on a notification for US availability. But just talking about these two right here in terms of the price to value ratio, I do think that the OnePlus is giving a little bit more value for the price just because it does come in at a much cheaper price than the S25 Ultra. But when you consider trade-in factors and deals that Samsung usually throws in, plus all of the high-end specs that come with the S25 Ultra, it kind of becomes a little bit closer. First thing I want to talk about is which one is better in terms of the design and the build. Now, the build and the design is definitely quite a departure from the OnePlus 13 on the 15, but what you're going to see and notice is that the edges are flat, just like an S25 Ultra, just like an iPhone, for example. The overall shape, though, is a little bit more rounded in the corner. Thickness is not too different between these two. But what is different is that the weight of the OnePlus 15 is definitely lighter than that of the Galaxy S25 Ultra at 211 grams versus 218. So you feel that weight difference, but the thickness is nearly identical, 8.1 to 8.2 millimeters thick. But the S25 Ultra just kind of looks like it towers over, if you see it from that angle, it just kind of looks like it towers over the OnePlus 15. But that doesn't mean it's a better usability phone day to day, because actually the corners are a bit sharper in the corner and it's taller, so it's a harder reach. While I do like that more for S Pen usage, and it's definitely necessary if you're going to be using S Pen, I do find the build and design, well, mostly the comfort to hold the OnePlus 15 to be a little bit nicer. Now, the rear camera definitely stands out as something a little bit different than their previous circular layout, but Samsung has kind of been going with this same traffic-like looking camera for the past several years. I call it that, just like I call the iPhone the stovetop camera, just because that's what it reminds me of. But this is a pretty simple, clean design. This phone a little bit more conservative, but OnePlus seems to be going in that direction as well with this, because I think the 13 definitely stood out a bit more than this phone. But it's a clean, simple design, and the one that is better in terms of the design to me is probably the S25 Ultra. I think it looks better. Overall, I think it's a cleaner, more high-end looking device. So I'm going to give Samsung in terms of the design. But in terms of the comfort to hold this phone and actual usability day to day, I like holding the OnePlus 15 more. So from design and build, they're basically a tie. So when it comes to display, which is stronger? Well, in terms of pure specification, it is purely going to be the Samsung. I actually was pixel peeping a couple nights ago on these two devices, and I gotta say, the S25 Ultra's higher pixel density is very noticeable when you do get very up close to the phone, but generally it has better anti-reflective properties as well on the S25 Ultra. But that 498 pixels per inch versus 450 on the left are noticeable when you are getting up close. It's not that noticeable, but you know, S25 Ultra definitely has the better panel in terms of that area. Now, the Galaxy actually does have a larger panel as well, so we are looking at about 6.9 inches. That's why it looks like it towers over the 6.78 on the OnePlus. Both of them are HDR10 Plus supported, but the OnePlus does have the ability to go 165 hertz within certain games. It does tend to run at about a 120 hertz, just kind of navigating the display. But generally, when you get into that 165 hertz in the games, it definitely looks smoother there. In terms of display features, though, the OnePlus 15 does have a nice array of screen features, including vivid modes, standard modes. You can tweak them with the color wheel right down there. In addition, eye care, comfort stuff, And I gotta say, it does have better PWM than the Samsung. So for those of you sensitive, the OnePlus actually, even with its 1.5K display, is a bit better. It does have very thin bezels, but the overall screen to body ratio is still a little bit better on the Samsung at 92.5%. The deal is that the coating for the anti-reflection on the Samsung to me has been definitely the one that I feel looks better, especially with the screen protector I put that also kind of mimics what the anti-reflective coating looks like. So this is the screen protector Samsung makes, which just basically does the same thing the display does without having the actual display wear off. But the OnePlus definitely has a little bit more glare. It does have the screen protector built in, but the screen protector on the OnePlus, the built-in one, is not that good. Scratches very easily, so do keep that in mind. You might have to get your own third party if you want a little bit better than what comes from factory. Now, they both do have, pretty strong Gorilla Glass. However, the Samsung does have a bit better here with Gorilla Glass Armor 2. It can withstand Mohs level 6. Over here, Mohs level 5 on the OnePlus 15. So essentially scratching easier on the OnePlus 15, but they do include a screen protector and you'll probably throw one on there anyway. Generally though, you can definitely see that both of them are going to be large and enjoyable panels. While both of them get plenty bright, both are easy to see outdoors, the Samsung just takes the edge here. And the auto rotate feature is a little bit better on the Samsung as well. So I do think here's the deal. If you do want to use the display like for media consumption, the majority of your use is going to be reading on your phone, you want the best of the best, I would pick Samsung here. They are definitely the better phone here in this area. But if it's a PWM issue for you, OnePlus is better. If you want, maybe I would say Samsung's a little bit more vivid. If you would want like more of a natural tone, they've really calibrated this display very nicely. And the bezels do, to me, look a little bit thinner on the OnePlus. So if you do want more of an edge-to-edge look, I do think the OnePlus is a bit better. But if you take a look at those punch holes right there, the OnePlus's punch hole is bigger. So again, it just kind of feels like I have more to work with here and sharper on the Galaxy on the right here. Now, when it comes to the software experience, the OnePlus to me definitely has a cleaner, simpler, and probably just a little bit more smooth experience to me. It's kind of like the experience of, I would say, close to what Apple does, but for an Android device, maybe even similar to Pixel as well. But it does give you just a lot of nice inclusions like AI, the plus key over here. You also do have smooth animations. The parallel processing is excellent. They don't overbear you with features, but they give you the additional add-ons that make this software just kind of enjoyable to use. Also, if you've been using Samsung or another brand for a long time, this could be a fun change for you to try out. But generally, I tend to really like the Oxygen OS on here. It's very fun to use, and it's simple and clean, and it adds those additions that would make a vanilla Android phone boring by comparison to this. So Oxygen OS 16, definitely pretty strong. I really enjoy it. It doesn't have quite as long as software support, so that does go to the Samsung. They do get about 2 or 3 years more support. But when it comes to let's go over here to the Samsung. What I like about the Samsung is it's feature heavy. This phone just has so much features. It's so fun to use if you want to dive deep into the device. However, I think it can be a bit boring and conservative if you've been using Samsung for a very long time and you're used to it. And you can get used to anything if you use it long enough. But for most people, I just never get bored of this phone. There's just so much to do. My only thing is I just don't think it looks as nice as some of the other software out there. That's just a personal preference, though. Again, this whole section is personal preference, but I do like how it kind of like matches up with the watch, the Galaxy Watch that I got. It matches up with my Galaxy Tab and even goes well with my Samsung laptop. So features are heavy. Ecosystem is tied up pretty nice. OnePlus does have the OnePlus Watch and the Pad, so they have a tablet as well, and OnePlus Buds. So they're not too far behind. They're only missing the laptop section, but other than that, they're basically on par when it comes to that. So overall, ecosystems are getting strong on all of them. I just would say that the OnePlus software to me is a bit cleaner. It's a bit, simpler. It also, to me, it has a little bit smoother animations. Samsung is snappier, more productive with its S Pen. It also does have, a little bit more heavy features, and it really does come down to user preference at this point. I don't think you can go wrong either way. But if you want those longer software support and you want heavier features, it's Samsung. If you want a cleaner, simpler software experience with nice additions, but also having a very smooth animation and visually pleasing look, you're probably going to enjoy the OnePlus more. So when it comes to gaming, the OnePlus is the better phone. It does have the ability to support 165 Hertz. It does have higher average frame rates. It does have the newer GPU. So hands down, and it has a bigger battery, which means your games would last longer. Hands down, if you're going to be playing games, go with the OnePlus 15 here. This one is the better device. However, the Samsung isn't really super far behind either. It doesn't run at 165 Hertz, but it does have a larger panel. It is I would say a better anti-reflective like we talked about earlier, and a better screen. So the actual game might look a little bit, I would say, more vivid, a little bit nicer on the Samsung, but it's going to run smoother, and visually it's going to look smoother when you're with the frame rates. I think that if I was just gaming, I would pick the OnePlus for sure. It's more comfortable to hold, longer battery, and while the display is a little bit nicer on the Samsung, it doesn't have quite as good of performance. Now, both of these can get pretty toasty under gaming, but they don't get like anywhere near where it's super uncomfortable to hold them, but they can warm up quite a bit there. Now, when it comes to performance, I already did a speed test, and you've seen that they're pretty much neck and neck, with the OnePlus being a little bit smoother looking, with the Samsung with snappy animations. OnePlus did better in terms of the RAM management. That's mostly due to the fact that I have the 12 gigabyte of RAM Samsung S25 Ultra over here, and this is the 16 gig of RAM, but it does have higher clock speeds on both the first cluster and a second cluster. While they're not that much different in day-to-day use, the actual multitasking and overall performance to me is a little bit more consistent on the OnePlus, but it's very, very minute. It's very, very small. So really, again, it comes down to preference, but I do have to state, from a technical standpoint, the OnePlus is the stronger phone. It is the better phone in performance right now, but that's probably going to change when the overclocked version of the S26 Ultra does make its appearance. Now, the next area is one of the most important areas to most users in 2025, as our phone use has become very, very high, and that is going to be battery life. Now, this is no contest. The OnePlus easily takes the victory. I'm not saying that the Samsung Galaxy S25 Ultra is bad in any way, shape, and form. It really isn't, but you can't compare a 5,000 milliamp to a 7,300 milliamp hour battery. This is silicon carbon variety, which allows this to be definitely not get super thick, but still, because that technology makes the battery a little bit smaller and more compact, so it allows this phone to stay within the normal flagship range, but give you a larger cell. Now, this can last anywhere from 30 to 40% longer on a day-to-day basis. What does that mean? It doesn't mean the actual 30% battery to 40% battery. What it means is that maybe you're looking at maybe 2 hours more video playback, stuff like that, maybe an hour and a half, depending on how bright you have the screen. The reality is that it just lasts much longer. To me, it also has better standby time than the Samsung. There is one note though, the Samsung actually does have more cycle count, so you could actually cycle this phone 2,000 times before the battery should drain substantially. This one's about 1,100 cycles on the OnePlus. That's mostly due to the fact that this phone does fast charge ridiculous quick, and when we come to fast charging, the OnePlus is going to take that victory as well. So fast charges faster, has better standby time, lasts much longer on actual use. Samsung, though, lasts very long as well, charges slower, but the battery should maintain its capacity a little bit longer, probably due to that slower charging as well. So I like the battery technology in the OnePlus. I want to see it make its way over to the next versions of the Samsung S line. I like to see silicon carbon batteries in those one day as well. Now, when it comes to network and connectivity, though, I have found the Samsung to be just a bit better. It does have what seems to be better band support, at least in the US for me. We do have most of the same bands on the OnePlus, and I haven't noticed any substantial issues getting along with this phone. Samsung device tends to do a bit better in more fringe locations, garages, things underground, things of that sort. But other than that, not a big discrepancy here. I don't feel like you can really call one substantially better than the other in this department. I will talk about the audio performance though. The OnePlus slightly edges the Samsung. Also, you can control the OnePlus with an IR, blaster on this phone. It does allow you to control TVs and stuff of that sort on this device. You can see it right here via the IR remote. So let's go over there. You can see I do have it hooked up to my LG TV right there. And you can use other devices as well. I had an issue getting it to work with the Apple TV though, so do keep that in mind. That wasn't super successful. As far as special features here, the S line is always going to have the S Pen as a true special feature over pretty much any other phone. It is a separator if you use this device, but for a lot of people I've been reading in the comments, they say they don't really use it that much. I do like that both of these phones do have SIM cards though, so that is a really big deal here for both products to both have SIM cards. But the speakers again are slightly going to the OnePlus 15. So it's been a pretty fun comparison here. We didn't talk too much about AI, but OnePlus has stepped it up in the AI department as well. They also do have the ability to share with iPhones a little bit easier than the Samsung phone does. They play nicer with those devices. So that's a nice thing. If you have a lot of iPhone users and you want to use the OnePlus and you want to share things, that's going to be easier over here. But OnePlus is kind of catching up, I feel like, to Samsung with AI. They kind of already had most of this stuff on their phone. However, you do have the Gemini key over here, so that's a great thing. And then over here, you do have the Gemini as well. There's the plus key now, so nice special feature right there. You can change between ring and silent, vibrate if you want. So let's call it the final verdict. Which one is better? And when I tallied up all the categories I discussed here, it was pretty much a tie because they're both better in different ways. And for some people, the OnePlus 15 doesn't mark a massive upgrade, and some people think it's a step back from the OnePlus 13 in certain ways due to the reduction in no Hasselblad cameras, the 1.5K display. Some people think those are step backs that make this no longer being even talked about with higher end flagships. When it comes to cameras, I do have to state, I think this is where OnePlus falls a little bit short. While they do have good computational photography with the Detail Max engine, it does sharpen things up after the fact. Things do look very nice. I just don't think they can compete with the log modes and all the things that we are offering on board here with the Samsung Galaxy S25 Ultra. This phone does have better optical zoom range. While this one does go 120 zoom, the zooming, they've been working on this for a while. You know, it's been pretty good on the Samsung. Over here for the more, we do have, different pro video modes. You have quite a few on here as well. But where the Samsung really shines over the OnePlus is in low light. It does have more, it does have log modes as well. And to me, it's just a little bit more feature rich and a little bit more flagship oriented. Over here, if we go ahead and go to photos and we back it out, the front facing cameras are pretty strong as well. They do have pretty soft photos. I do think that the OnePlus is good enough to not make this a deciding factor though. You can go 0.8 2 times, and really it comes down to how much are you using your camera. The front facing video is 4K up to 60. If we turn this around, you do have the master mode, which is kind of similar to what they had on the Hasselblad setup. And you do have quite a few modes here. The deal is though, is the actual results, mostly in low light, tend to turn out better on the Samsung. I find the further zoom ranges to look much nicer on the Samsung as well. They get a bit noisy on the, go over here to photo. They get a little bit more noisy as you zoom in on the OnePlus over here. But generally, this is still a strong setup, even though a lot of reviews are saying it's not. And but it just can't, to me, it just doesn't beat the overall setup here for the S25 Ultra from my experience. So I gotta state that the photos just look better on the S25 Ultra. So I'd pick this when it comes to the camera department over the OnePlus 15. But the OnePlus 15 is not a slouch. It is still pretty strong, and I don't think it's a deciding factor for those of you who are not buying this phone for content creation, for example. But the OnePlus does beat the Samsung in some marketable ways. Like it does have the better battery life, the better performance, the better 165 hertz in games if you do play those games, faster charging, more comfortable design. Some would argue a better looking design. So they do have some things that would make users want to choose that over the Samsung. But the Samsung still has the great design. It does look very, very beautiful, very rectangular. It's kind of like a legendary look right here overall. I do like it. I think the S24 Ultra was a bit better looking, but this one still retains that iconic S-line look over here. It's like a mashup of a lot of features in one here. It just feels like the jack of all trades. The Samsung doesn't master anything perfectly, but does everything very well Definitely gives you that ultra camera as well. So some of the areas the display is better as well. Some of the areas resale value too is better on the Samsung. So there's a lot of things that still give you the edge, longer software support. So to me, they're pretty much a tie. I couldn't really come to the conclusion that one is better than the other after doing this comparison. So that is I didn't expect that though. I thought the newer phone might have edged it, but to me, it just doesn't. There's just other things that make this a great device. So Samsung has held its own, even though they dropped this phone almost a year ago already.